In 1978, in the jungles of Guyana, over 900 Americans died in a single day, many after poisoning their own children. The question that has haunted us for decades isn't just what happened, but why? How does a journey that begins with a search for utopia end in an act of mass self-destruction? In this video, we are conducting a psychological autopsy on the anatomy of a con. You will get a framework that goes beyond the headlines to explain the specific cognitive biases that made some of the world's sharpest minds willfully blind to the truth. This is more than a story about fraud. It's a deep dive into the vulnerabilities of a human mind. This is the story of an architect of ruin. You may already know the basics. Elizabeth Holmes, the Stanford dropout who promised to revolutionize healthcare with a single drop of blood. You know the technology was a sham and that she was convicted of fraud. But here's the perspective you haven't heard. The most fascinating part of the Theranos story isn't Elizabeth Holmes's deception. It's the psychology of her believers. We often ask, how could they be so stupid? But the truth is, they weren't stupid at all. They were accomplished, intelligent, and powerful. They were simply human. Welcome to The Mind Explained, where we are dedicated to exploring the most complex subject in the universe, the human mind. For those who seek to understand the hidden patterns behind our actions, we analyze the light and shadow within us all, one unforgettable story at a time. Before we get started, I want to hear from you. Where are you watching from right now, and what time is it where you are? Let me know in the comments below. It's always great to see how far these stories travel. To understand the fall, you must first understand the spell. Elizabeth Holmes wasn't just a CEO, she was a master storyteller. She understood that a great story is more powerful than a great product, especially when the product doesn't exist. Her entire persona was a calculated construction. The black turtleneck was a deliberate echo of her idol, Steve Jobs, a visual shorthand for visionary. The famously faked deep voice and unflinching eye contact weren't quirks, they were tools. Research shows that a lower-pitched voice is perceived as more authoritative. An intense eye contact can be interpreted as either deeply trustworthy or intimidating. Holmes used it for both. These are some of the first red flags of a manipulative person, an identity that seems too perfect, too curated, too much like a character in a story. And the story she told was irresistible. It wasn't about profits, it was about saving lives. This is a classic manipulation tactic known as moral justification. She framed her mission in such noble, unassailable terms that to question Theranos felt like questioning progress itself. It felt cynical. For many of us in our professional lives, we've encountered a scaled-down version of this. The charismatic leader with a grand vision who makes you feel like you're part of something world-changing. They sell the why so effectively that you forget to ask how. But while Holmes was selling this beautiful dream to the world, a very different reality was taking shape behind the curtain. The architect was designing a fortress of belief, and the walls were closing in on those who dared to see the cracks. The first to notice were the people closest to the truth, and what they experienced was a masterclass in psychological control. The list of people who backed Theranos is staggering. Henry Kissinger, George Shultz, Rupert Murdoch, seasoned venture capitalists who had built fortunes betting on innovation. So, why did they all fall for it? The answer has less to do with Holmes's lies and more to do with the glitches in our own thinking. First, they were ensnared by the halo effect. This is a cognitive bias where our positive impression of a person in one area causes us to see them positively. In all areas, Holmes had a brilliant halo. She was a young, female Stanford dropout in a male-dominated industry, mentored by Silicon Valley royalty. Her board was a who's who of powerful older men, lending her an aura of credibility she hadn't earned. The halo was so bright, it blinded investors to the fact that she had never actually produced any validated data. They saw the impressive board, the Steve Jobs cosplay, and the noble mission, and their brains filled in the rest. Someone this impressive must have the technology to back it up. Then came confirmation bias. This is our natural tendency to search for, interpret, and favor information that confirms our pre-existing beliefs. Once investors decided Holmes was the next Steve Jobs, they unconsciously looked for evidence to support that belief while dismissing anything that contradicted it. Red flags, like her evasiveness about how the technology worked, were reframed as the necessary secrecy of a brilliant mind protecting her invention. This is a profoundly human flaw. Think about a time you're feeling confused in a relationship, personal or professional. You know something feels off, but you're so invested in the person or the project that you explain away the warning signs. That's confirmation bias at work. It's the little voice that says, he must have just had a bad day, or this project is too important to fail over a minor detail. These mental shortcuts aren't a sign of low intelligence. They're a feature of how our brains efficiently process a complex world. But manipulators know how to turn these features into bugs. They exploit our desire to believe in something and someone great. Inside the walls of Theranos, the psychological manipulation was even more intense. Holmes and her partner, Sunny Balwani, cultivated a brutal internal culture built on fear, secrecy, and surveillance. As detailed by John Carreyrou in his book Bad Blood, employees were siloed. Scientists working on one part of the machine were forbidden from speaking to scientists working on another. This ensured that only Holmes and Balwani had the full picture and could control the narrative. When employees saw the technology failing and dared to speak up, they weren't just ignored. They were psychologically dismantled. This is where the story of Erica Chung and Tyler Schultz begins. Tyler was the grandson of board member and former Secretary of State George Shultz. Both were young, idealistic scientists who joined Theranos believing they were changing the world. What they found was a nightmare. They witnessed the company faking demos for investors, using competitors' machines to process tests, and deleting failed data points to make the results look good. When they raised concerns, management didn't debate the facts. They attacked the messengers. This is a tactic called gaslighting. It's a form of psychological abuse where a person is manipulated into questioning their own sanity and perception of reality. Chung and Schultz were told they were not a good fit for the company, that they didn't understand the science, that their concerns were naive. The message was clear: the problem isn't our fraudulent machine. The problem is you. It's a devastatingly effective tool. When you're constantly told that what you're seeing isn't real, you begin to doubt yourself. This is the core of how to deal with a manipulator. The first step is to trust your own perception of reality, even when they're telling you you're crazy. For Tyler Schultz, the pressure was immense. His own grandfather, a man he revered, was completely under Holmes' spell. When Tyler tried to warn him, George Shultz sided with Elizabeth, telling his grandson he was wrong. He was being gaslit by his own family. It was a choice between the truth and the relationship he cherished most. It's an extreme example of the challenge we all face when setting boundaries with toxic people, especially when there's a deep emotional connection or power imbalance. Erica and Tyler were faced with an impossible choice: stay silent and be complicit, or speak up and risk their careers, their reputations, and, in Tyler's case, his family. Their decision would bring a billion-dollar empire crashing down. The courage of Tyler Schultz and Erica Chung, who secretly worked with journalist John Carreyrou, was the catalyst for the end. The story they told exposed the entire operation as a house of cards. The architect of ruin had her blueprint revealed, and the structure collapsed. So what is the ultimate lesson of Theranos? It's not just that people lie for money and power. It's that we are all, regardless of our education or experience, susceptible to a masterfully told story. Elizabeth Holmes didn't just build a fraudulent company. She architected a system of belief that exploited our deepest cognitive vulnerabilities. So how do we protect ourselves? First, recognize the red flags of a manipulative person. Be wary of anyone who sells a story that is too perfect, who demands loyalty over critical questions, and who creates a powerful us versus them narrative. Second, actively fight your own biases. When you feel yourself becoming enamored with a person or an idea, consciously seek out dissenting opinions. Play devil's advocate with yourself. Ask the hard questions Holmes's investors never did. Show me the data. Show me the proof. Finally, Learn the importance of setting boundaries with toxic people. If a person or environment makes you question your own reality, that is a signal to disengage. Trust your gut, document what you see, and find an outside perspective from someone you trust who isn't under the same spell. The greatest cons don't just target our wallets. They target our minds, our hopes, and our desperate need to believe in something better. The story of Theranos is a cautionary tale, a reminder that the brightest light can sometimes cast the darkest shadow. What was the most surprising psychological trap for you? The halo effect? Gaslighting? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every one of them. If this video gave you a new lens through which to view human behavior, hit that like button and subscribe to The Mind Explained. We release new stories every week that decode the patterns of the human mind. Thanks for watching and stay curious.